Hello everyone. So in this video, I'm going to show you how to install R and RStudio on a Windows computer. But first, before I sort of get into that, I want to really emphasize the distinction between what R and RStudio actually is. So oftentimes people will get stuck before they even get to start learning R because they'll go ahead and download this right here called RStudio, which is the traditional environment that people will use R within. Typically, you'll see people, open up RStudio to do all their code. Oftentimes, it's the thing that people most readily associate with the language. And so they'll go ahead and install this before installing R, the language. But that's where, as I mentioned, we run into problems because R and RStudio are actually two different things. So we need to install first, as we see here, R, the language, which we can do in this tab up here on the left. And then we can go ahead and download RStudio, the sort of environment that makes R more user-friendly. So let's first go ahead and install R, the language. So for folks who are on Windows 10 and Windows 11, on 64-bit machines, you're going to be downloading R 4.2.1. For everyone else, I'm going to have a series of different links in the description that you can use to try and download the correct version for yourself. If you, for whatever reason, have trouble with that, which is totally understandable, definitely just shoot me an email, send me a message on Slack, or any number of things. And I'm happy to sort of work with you to get that resolved. Also, as I mentioned in the email, I'll have sort of office hours, if you will, throughout the week of the 15th. So you're welcome to come to those as well, and we can try to fix any installation issues for you. But first, I want to quickly show you how you can go about checking the actual OS of your machine. So we can go to this app here, System Information. And underneath System Summary, we can see all sorts of helpful information here. So we can first see the OS name. So I'm on Microsoft Windows 10. The version here is 10.0.19044. The last 5 digits here refer to the build of your version. And then you see down here under System Type that I'm on a 64-bit machine. And so I know that a lot of you are under or running 64-bit machines, so you're most likely going to be on Windows 10 or Windows 11. So for many of you, again, you can just use the link that I'm going to put in the description here to this one. But be careful, make sure you check your machine to be sure, and if you have any questions, it's better to just ask rather than getting yourself into any trouble. So what we're going to do here is go ahead and click download R 4.2.1, and it's going to download up here. The downloader is basically just called R 4.2.1 WIN, which is short for Windows, and then the classic.exe extension at the end here for our programs. So we can go ahead and open this file. Now, sometimes what's going to happen, so I'm now in my downloads here, I'm going to double click here. It will ask you whether you want the package to make changes to your computer. And I don't believe, based on my screen recorder, that you're going to be able to see this step. But if you get that, you do want to say yes. And once you're done with that, you can go ahead and deal with the actual installation toolbox. So I'm going to set up the language here. I'm an English speaker. I can go ahead and accept this agreement here. For this step here, picking the directory for R, the language, if you do not have a reason to change it, as in like why you're going to go ahead and change this, you should keep it as the default, i.e. program files are R 4.2.1, to avoid running into issues later. This right here will not pop up for you. This is just saying that I already have R installed, but I'm going to go ahead and write over it anyway. This is something that you will see where we have these 3 checkbox boxes, main files, 64-bit files, and then the message translation. So you want to install all three of those, and you can just click next. Here, we do want to accept the default, again, unless you have a reason that you understand that you should use a customized startup. But for pretty much everyone, I recommend saying no or accept the default. And then here, this top one is going to create a desktop shortcut. Just because I have R already, this is what it's going to look like for you. But keep that box checked in order to get that there. If you want to have a quick launch shortcut, which is down here, you can go ahead and do that as well. I do not do that. And then we need to make sure that these two boxes here with the registry entries are checked as well. I'm going to click next. And as soon as this bar is completed, we're actually all done with installing R, and then we'll move on to RStudio. Great. So we can go ahead and click finish here. And now this should appear on your desktop. It's the R with the little gray circle around it. And this here refers to R, the language. And so you'll notice here that we are able to use R fully without any limitations. So, for example, we can use R as a calculator if we want to generate numbers, which we'll learn how to do in just a little bit. We could do sequence of numbers from 0 to 10, increasing by increments of 0.5. So we can do everything we want down here in console. But the limitation of console, which is why we want RStudio, is that our console is not very user-friendly. So for example, if I made a mistake and I wanted to come up to this line here and change 10 to 11, I actually can't do that. I have to go ahead and start the line all over again and then sort of make changes to it that way. And so if we're making really complicated programs, or even relatively basic programs that require more than one line to complete, we essentially can't make any mistakes in our console, or else we're going to turn an error and then we have to start again. And so that's where RStudio comes in. So I'm going to go ahead and close out our console. And then let's go back to Microsoft Edge. And now we can go ahead and install RStudio. So we're going to come to this link here that I'm going to have in the description. And you're going to essentially see this at the top here to download RStudio IDE. You're going to scroll down to R Desktop Free, the open source license. Click download. And what's nice about the RStudio IDE is it actually can guess what the correct version of RStudio is for you. So in this case, it's going to be the 2022 version of RStudio for Windows. And I can just go ahead and click that. Again, if you're on Windows 10, 11, 64-bit, it's going to be the same as this. However, if you're on a machine that does not run either of those or is a 32-bit machine, it will also be able to guess that. But either way, when you get your correct version, we're going to go ahead and double-click the installer here. We'll just give it a second. And again, you can't see the screen here, but it's going to say, do you want to allow this app from an unknown publisher to make changes to your device? You want to say yes here. And then we have our installer just like normal. So we can go ahead, click next. Again, we're going to leave the default here, click next again. We're going to go ahead and click install. So we don't need a shortcut for this per se. And I'm going to go ahead and let this install. So I'll actually cut this portion out. It shouldn't take very long at all. But when we get back together again, I'm going to open up RStudio and R console next to each other and show you the distinction between the two of them. So great. Now RStudio is all installed. You can go ahead and click finish at the end. But either way, we're back on our desktop here, and we can go ahead and search RStudio. And what I'm going to do is pin this to the taskbar, since this is what I'm going to be opening up each time, not R console rather. But let's go ahead and open both RStudio and R console. So this here is our console. I'm going to make this smaller. And then we can go ahead and click yes, click yes. So now what we're looking at here is RStudio next to our console. And so it turns out that our console is actually built into RStudio. So here, console is the same as this over here. So if I type 2 plus 2, and then I come over here, type 2 plus 2, then I'm going to get 4, same thing over here. So it still works as a calculator. As I mentioned, if we did the sequence 0 to 10 by 1, we can go ahead, hit enter. So here's 0 through 10, the same thing over here. But here, we can do all sorts of more complicated and more user-friendly actions in RStudio, which we'll see in the next video, that we can't do in R console. So a good way to think about it is that RStudio requires R console, but once you have installed R the language, i.e. R console, it can do everything that R console can do, but more. So RStudio is just merely an environment that makes R more user-friendly and sort of extends its functionality for us. So again, in the next video, we're going to start learning about some of those extra functionalities, particularly through the R script. But for the time being, you now have everything installed. And so in the future, when you come and open up R again, I want to make sure that you are opening up RStudio, because you should be all good to go. But if you're able to get to the screen and type 2 plus 2 and you get a response, then that means you're good to go for the workshop, and you can move on to some of our other asynchronous videos before joining me next week. Thanks so much.